Right now, 90% of all fish on Earth are hiding, and scientists only discovered this in 2014. There are 8 distinct levels of the ocean, and at each one the life gets stranger, more ruthless, and more alien than the last. But the level that will genuinely disturb you isn't the deepest one. It's the one just below where you'd swim. By minute 8, the truth about Apollo 13's missing nuclear reactor sitting at the bottom of the ocean right now will reframe everything. The ocean is not one place. It is 8 completely separate worlds stacked on top of each other, and most of what lives in those worlds has never been seen by human eyes. The descent begins at the surface, warm, sunlit, familiar, and ends somewhere that makes the surface feel like a dream from another species' life. But the strangest part isn't what lives at the bottom. It's what the entire scientific community missed, for the entire history of marine biology, hiding in plain sight just 200 meters below a beach. The first zone is the sunlit layer, the epipelagic, stretching from the surface down to 200 meters. This is the ocean most people picture: coral reefs, dolphins, tuna cutting silver arcs through blue water. It receives enough sunlight to support photosynthesis. It is familiar. It is also, by biomass, almost entirely the wrong place to look for fish. Oceanographers have studied the epipelagic for centuries. They've mapped its currents, cataloged its predators, traced the migration routes of its largest animals. And for all that work, they were measuring only 10% of the ocean's fish, without knowing it. The other 90% existed below the light, in a zone that science, until recently, considered nearly empty. The mesopelagic zone begins at 200 meters. Sunlight fades here to a cold, blue-gray twilight and then to nothing. Temperatures drop sharply. Pressure climbs. Most submersibles that operate in this range report the same sensation. The water above begins to look like a ceiling, and the darkness below looks like it goes on forever, because for all practical purposes it does. In 2014, a research team published a global survey in the journal Deep Sea Research. Their instruments, acoustic sonar and net trawls deployed across every major ocean basin, returned numbers so large that editors initially questioned the methodology. The twilight zone did not contain a fraction of surface fish biomass. It contained 10 times more. Between 10 and 20 billion tons of fish were living in the dark, 200 to 1,000 meters down. That number, 10 billion tons, is what we came here to understand. But to feel the full weight of it, first meet the animal that makes up most of it. The creature is called a bristlemouth. Most people have never heard of it. Scientists believe it may be the most abundant vertebrate on the entire planet. Bristlemouths, fish of the genus Cyclothone, are small, translucent, and armed with disproportionately large fang-like teeth that give their mouths the appearance of something drawn by a child imagining a sea monster. They measure roughly the length of a finger. They live between 200 and 1,000 meters deep. And they exist, according to current estimates, in numbers that reach into the quadrillions. A number so large it renders every other vertebrate population on Earth statistically invisible by comparison. A quadrillion bristlemouths. For reference, there are approximately 8 billion humans. There are roughly 170 billion individual fish estimated in the sunlit zone. The bristlemouth outnumbers every vertebrate combined, possibly by several orders of magnitude, and until 2014 most estimates didn't even account for them properly. They were there all along. Science just wasn't looking deep enough. But here is what makes the twilight zone genuinely strange. It is not static. Every single day, the organisms living in it, fish, plankton, squid, crustaceans, perform the largest migration on the planet. They rise toward the surface at dusk to feed. They descend again before dawn. Billions of animals moving in concert twice daily like a breathing tide of living matter. This migration was discovered by accident. During World War II, U.S. Navy sonar operators monitoring for enemy submarines noticed something alarming. Every night, Their instruments showed the ocean floor appearing to rise, a false bottom, surging upward as darkness fell, then sinking again at sunrise. Officers debated whether enemy technology was creating phantom readings. Some believed the seafloor itself was somehow moving. What they were actually detecting was a living layer. Billions of fish and zooplankton rising from 400 meters to near the surface under cover of darkness, their collective mass dense enough to reflect sonar like solid ground. Scientists eventually named it the deep scattering layer, a biological phenomenon so large it fooled military instruments into misreading the depth of the ocean itself. It had been happening every night forever, completely undetected. In a moment, the ocean gets darker, colder, and considerably more disturbing. What lives below 1,000 meters is not like anything from the surface world. But first, the depth where the light disappears completely has a resident that deserves its own warning. The bathypelagic zone begins at 1,000 meters. No sunlight reaches here. Pressure at this depth exceeds 100 atmospheres. The water temperature hovers near freezing. Bioluminescence, living light, produced by the organisms themselves, is the only illumination, flashing in cold blues and greens against absolute blackness. The creatures here are not adapted to survive in this environment. They are built by it, over millions of years of evolution, into shapes that would seem impossible anywhere else. The anglerfish lives here, and what science has confirmed about its reproduction is the most disturbing documented fact in vertebrate biology. Here is the cliffhanger. The male anglerfish does not mate with the female. He merges with her permanently, irrevocably, dissolving his own body into hers. But first, understand exactly what that process looks like from the outside, because the sequence of events is what makes it genuinely horrifying. When a male anglerfish locates a female in the absolute darkness of the bathypelagic zone, he bites into her skin. His body then begins to fuse at the cellular level. Over weeks, his eyes dissolve. His fins dissolve. His internal organs dissolve, all of them except the testes. His circulatory system merges with hers. He loses his individual existence entirely, becoming a permanent appendage, a living sperm sac embedded in her flesh, kept alive by her blood. The size difference between the two sexes is among the most extreme in vertebrate biology. Female anglerfish can reach 500,000 times the body weight of the males that fuse to them. A single female may carry multiple males simultaneously, each one a former independent organism now reduced to reproductive tissue. Science calls this sexual parasitism. No other vertebrate on Earth reproduces this way. It evolved here, in the dark, under a kilometer of water, because, in an environment with almost no light and almost no prey, the cost of searching for a mate twice was evolutionarily fatal. Below 2,000 meters lies the abyssal zone, the largest habitat on Earth by area, covering more than half the ocean floor. It is almost featureless, flat, cold, nearly lightless plains of sediment stretching thousands of kilometers without interruption. For decades, textbooks described it as a biological desert. That description was wrong, but the truth took even longer to surface than the Twilight Zone revelation did. Life in the abyss is sparse but present. See cucumbers that process sediment like aquatic earthworms, brittle stars filtering particles from near-zero currents, pale fish that drift without apparent purpose across the mud. What makes the abyss strange is not what lives in it, but what humans have done to it. The deepest parts of the abyssal ocean became, in the mid-20th century, a disposal site, chosen specifically because they were thought to be too remote, too pressurized, and too inaccessible for anything deposited there to ever return. Between the 1970s and 1980s, pharmaceutical companies legally dumped more than 387,000 tons of chemical waste into the Puerto Rico Trench, the deepest point in the Atlantic Ocean, reaching nearly 8,400 meters at its nadir. The volume of material represented the approximate weight of 880 fully loaded Boeing 747 aircraft. The logic was blunt. Depth equals isolation. Regulators assumed that at those pressures, in those temperatures, with those currents, chemical waste would simply remain where it was placed, inert and unreachable. Deep-sea biologists were not consulted. What happens in the next zone is what we came for, and it involves a piece of hardware from one of history's most famous near disasters, still sitting at the bottom of the ocean right now. The Hadal Zone begins at 6,000 meters. It exists almost exclusively in ocean trenches, narrow, V-shaped scars in the seafloor created by the collision of tectonic plates. The Mariana Trench in the Pacific reaches 11,000 meters at its deepest point. The pressure there exceeds 1,000 atmospheres. Water at that depth behaves differently than water at the surface. It is slightly denser, slightly compressible, a physical environment so extreme that until 2008, marine scientists admitted they knew almost nothing real about the creatures living in it. One researcher described the collection as shriveled specimens, a phrase that summarized the entire body of hadal biology before modern pressure-preserving sampling technology existed. In April 1970, Apollo 13 aborted its moon landing after an oxygen tank exploded in the service module. The crew survived by sheltering in the lunar module. But the lunar module carried something that could not be brought back safely: a SNAP-27 radioisotope thermoelectric generator, loaded with 3.9 kilograms of plutonium-238, designed to power scientific instruments on the lunar surface. When the module re-entered Earth's atmosphere, the generator survived re-entry intact, exactly as designed. It sank into the South Pacific, specifically into the Tonga Trench, one of the deepest oceanic trenches on Earth, reaching between 6,000 and 10,882 meters at various points. NASA and the Atomic Energy Commission tracked its trajectory and confirmed it came to rest somewhere between 6,000 and 9,000 meters below the surface. Plutonium has a half-life of 87.7 years, meaning meaningful radioactivity persists for several thousand years. The generator is still there. It has been irradiating the Hadal Zone continuously since 1970. NASA's official position is that the casing remains intact and that no significant radioactive contamination has occurred. Independent researchers have noted that verifying this claim would require retrieving or inspecting an object resting under more than 6 kilometers of water in one of the most structurally complex geological environments on Earth, something no agency has attempted. The Tonga Trench continues to be studied for its biological communities. Samples taken from hadal trenches have returned with measurable concentrations of man-made pollutants, including persistent organic compounds. The Hadal Zone was, until recently, described as lifeless. That was wrong. Amphipods, small, shrimp-like crustaceans, thrive at full hadal depth, feeding on organic material that drifts down from above. Snailfish have been filmed at over 8,000 meters, pale and slow, moving through the dark with improbable calm. The deepest place on Earth is not empty. It is not isolated. It receives, continuously, everything that falls from the 8 zones above it: nutrients, carbon, chemical waste, and at least one nuclear generator from a mission that almost didn't come home. So here's what the descent reveals. The hidden 90% of Earth's fish live in the twilight zone, discovered not by exploration, but by sonar in 2014, because they were too deep, too numerous, and too unfamiliar to count from the surface. Science missed them because it was looking in the wrong direction. The level that should disturb you most isn't the bottom. It's that mesopelagic layer just below your swim depth, teeming with billions of unseen creatures moving beneath you right now. And at the true bottom sits Apollo 13's plutonium generator, quietly irradiating the deepest place on Earth for thousands of years to come. Drop a comment. Does the ocean floor feel like a discovery or a crime scene?